Welcome to the Iron Prescription Podcast with your hosts, Drs. Lynette and Stuart. We're both GPs and we're both personal trainers, though we do both jobs in very different ways. We chat about the best things you can do for your health and fitness, and along the way, help you to avoid wasting time on the things that really aren't. Thanks for listening. Okay.
Good morning and welcome to Technical Issues with Lynette and Stuart.
I think we're there. Well, the proof will be in the final result. Let's see. But it can only be good. Right. We are going to talk about weight loss injections.
Weight loss injections.
Yes.
Dirty word of weight loss injections.
We've got to do it. We've got to do it because these things are here.
Definitely. So, okay. GLP-1s, which stands for...
Glucagon-like peptide.
Fantastic. What is glucagon, Doctor?
It's the opposite of insulin.
So glucagon is a naturally occurring hormone in the body that, when produced, releases sugars into our system. If you've got somebody who's suffering from a hypoglycemic attack, then we give them glucagon as a intramuscular injection to help the body release its own stores of sugar. So it floods the system with sugar. So why then would something that's got glucagon in the title would make you lose weight when it appears to just give you huge amounts of sugar? Well, it's in the P and the 1 that's the peptide, and the 1 is the difference. And actually what it does is it makes the body far more sensitive to sugar and drags sugar into the bones, the muscle, the heart, the brain, and demands more metabolic drive. So this naturally occurring hormone that we have in our bodies has now been bottled and allows you to take it in an injection. What it's making your body think is, because it works in your head, in your brain as well, it switches off where it's going to get that sugar from. So it doesn't ask you to eat more. What it says is, don't worry, I've got this covered. You don't need to eat anything. In fact, you feel full. I need to get this from somewhere else. So where does it go to? It goes to anywhere you can get it. And the quickest way you can get it is, firstly, it uses up your own free-floating glucose in the body. But when it runs out of that, which doesn't take long, it says, right, I'll have that fat over there. And it starts burning through fat really quickly. And that, in the basic form for the listeners, is what a weight loss injection does.
And I would summarise that as saying these injections will treat hunger and satiety. That's the one sentence pitch for these things.
It will treat hunger, yes. In the background to that, it's also making your body need more. So it needs more energy, but you don't want to give your body that energy. You have no desire to eat. So it's got to go somewhere. It's got to drive that from somewhere. And it drives that from taking the fat. However, it will take it from anywhere, and we'll come on to that, because fat is not the only macro of energy. So it will eat your muscle as well.
Well, let's zoom out from that a little bit and just start with who is looking at these injections. And obviously, we've both known about them as doctors because they're not particularly new in the world of diabetes. And they have had a huge positive impact on being able to manage diabetes control for a really long time.
Yeah.
With the added benefit of these people losing some weight along the way. Yeah. And I have to say that avoiding becoming diabetic, or if you are diabetic, managing your glucose control is the most life-saving thing that you can really do. And, you know, in the remaining NHS job that I have at the moment, where I scrutinise the events leading up to somebody's death and countersign the death certificate, diabetes is it's not sneaky, it's very overt, but it goes on so many death certificates. But because it goes in the secondary cause, it doesn't appear as often as it should in the major causes of death. But what it is doing is putting those things into the front line. So many, many people dying of heart attacks, dying of strokes, dying of pneumonias, dying of sepsis will have diabetes in the background pulling the strings.
Mm.
And I think this is where, when you're talking about weight loss injections, the celebrity world and the fitness world can get their knickers in a knot about it. But in the medical world, these have been an incredible breakthrough, because diabetes is killing people left, right, and centre. And I just think it's really important to keep that at the forefront
Absolutely.
of any discussion around weight and health.
And just for people to understand why is diabetes such a bad thing? We're talking about primarily here, in this conversation, we're talking about type 2 diabetes. There's type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is something that we won't talk about today, and that is an autoimmune condition that you get normally in your childhood. And it's where you get a complete autoimmune reaction, so the body is fighting itself, and you get destruction of something called the islets of Langerhans, which sit in the pancreas and make insulin, and you have no insulin. So you no longer make insulin. What does insulin do? Insulin takes the sugars out of our diet, and it makes it able to cross the barrier to be used as energy. And I'm not going to get into what type of sugars and everything. That's basically what it does. Type 2 diabetes, which is what we're going to talk about today, and how that fits into weight loss medication, is where you have a resistance to insulin. So the insulin no longer works in the same way, no longer has the affinity and the drive to be able to push that sugar into cells, and it leaves the sugar free floating around in the bloodstream. So why is that a problem? Well, the easiest way I describe it to patients is, do you like having your hands sticky? You know, when you've been making toffee apples or whatever and your hands are really sticky, life just becomes difficult when your hands are sticky. Everything is slow, everything's gungy. You mean to pick up something, you can't let go of something, you just can't move as fluidly as you can with your hands when they're really sticky. Imagine that happening throughout your body. Everything is not working properly. Your vessels are sticky, the nerve impulses are sticky, everything is a lot slower. And as things slow down, then you start getting disease. So you're no longer oiled in the same way as you were, and you haven't got the lovely moisturiser on your hands, because it's just everything is sticking together. And therefore, you end up getting things like heart disease, peripheral vascular disease, where the blood can't get to your limbs. And you end up with dementia, you end up with different types of cancer, all because of this excess sugar that's in your system and can't be driven out. And unfortunately, when this excess sugar is floating around, the body goes, "Whoa, what do I do with this? I can't use it as energy. I'll lay it down as fat." And what fat does, it also then makes the insulin even more less sensitive to how it was working before. So the upside is that as you become diabetic, the condition of diabetes makes you more diabetic, and you're in this ever decreasing circle where eventually, it's not going to happen tomorrow. If you have diabetes today, you won't die of diabetes tomorrow, but highly unlikely. But if you leave it for 5, definitely 10 years, we're talking about years being wiped off your life as a result of it. And what these GLP-1s do is they reverse that, and they make the body's insulin work properly again. And in doing so, like I said, described before, you lose weight as well. So for type 2 diabetics, this is a miracle drug. As you said, as a side effect, you lose weight. But the rest of us have gone, you lose weight? Fantastic.
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah.
I'll have some of that.
Yeah.
And that's where we've ended up. We've both listened to a recent podcast talking about GLP-1s. And if the NHS prescribed them just to everybody who was overweight, the NHS, which is already bankrupt, would be completely bankrupt within 5 years, because of the scientists that invented this, the companies that invented this. They didn't just go, "Oh, yes." They weren't like the guys that invented insulin, who gave away the patent for $1. Insulin was invented, and they gave away the patent for $1. The guys that invented these GLP-1s went, of course, then you've got that marketing machine that's allowed that to happen. So they're incredibly expensive drugs compared to drugs like paracetamol. They do work, and they can be used in not the form that they're designed for, but for the aesthetic outcome of losing significant amounts of weight without trying.
And even within using them within the diabetes world, it's worth saying that part of the tricky issue in managing diabetes is it's so slowly progressive, and you don't feel particularly unwell early on, and you can quite easily forget that you're diabetic for a number of years. And we know for a fact there's many people walking around undiagnosed. Therefore, the urgency with which you need to change is not like something that's causing you pain. If you're in agony with a back pain, you're going to take action probably to try and get out of pain, but it doesn't work like that. So it relies very much on long-term behavior change, which we know is hard. And even when people know that something is potentially life-threatening, old habits are very well ingrained, and people get pulled into old habits time and time again. And so what I see is people in the fitness space judging and making out that people should just do what needs to be done. And I don't necessarily think it's that straightforward. If behavior change was that easy, because there's no shortage of information in the world. But so my point is, it's not so much that we need to get into a discussion about behavior change. It's just that we have seen a gradual rise of the number of diabetics. And this is global. This is not just in the UK. If you look at the Middle East, when I did the diabetes diploma, their switch to a more globalized standard diet is seeing huge rates of type 2 diabetes in really rich countries. So this is a global phenomenon as the food environment changes. Yeah. And that in itself is why these medications can potentially have such an impact. But as you say, the cost is huge. Our NHS, has it's in end of life mode. Probably needs a do not resuscitate order on it, but
it's definitely got DNR, and it's definitely got palliative care been called in.
Yeah. But when you're faced with these people and you can see what lies ahead in the next 2 years or 5 years or whatever, you want to be able to help them. And so it has been amazing to be able to see people get the benefit of these as type 2 diabetics and see that the needles start to shift.
Yeah.
And then incredibly, for a lot of people, what then happens is motivation and behavior change can start to follow that. And that's a really significant shift, because people feel like their backs are against the wall and they're sick of trying everything. They're caught up perhaps in communities or situations which they just don't know how to change, and that is really hard. So certainly as a doctor, I think they have been brilliant to be able to add to the things that we can offer to help people. But now we're in this situation where there's more people that could benefit. Tomorrow's diabetics could benefit or be prevented even, but we're not necessarily, well, we're definitely not in a financial position to be able to kind of manage that.
So the big thing about this, and you just alluded to it, is I can have somebody in the gym with me, and we can do 4 sessions a week. We could do 4 45-minute sessions a week of HIIT, and I can say to the patient or to the client in a PT world, I can say to the client, this is doing you fantastic, great things for you, and your physiology is changing, and they can spend 45 minutes 4 times a week literally feeling like they are on the end of life. Done a HIIT session with them for 45 minutes, and they're thinking, I'm glad he's a doctor because I'm going to die in a minute. Hopefully he'll get back. And they can look in the mirror and they go, nothing's changed. And they can do that for weeks and nothing has changed. It was changing inside them, but the 6-packs don't happen in the gym, they happen in the kitchen. And if you don't change that, what's happening in the kitchen, what I do with you will make you feel different, and it might make you look a bit more muscular underneath, but 45 minutes, 4 times a week isn't going to touch you from a fat perspective. Whereas this is going to change your world, and you are going to get that motivation from seeing that immediate hit on your aesthetics. And we can't get away from that. It's not about aesthetics. I hate aesthetics. I hate the way the gym world and the Instagrammers make us think we've got to look a certain way. It's about you. And we've talked about this before, so I won't go over old stuff, but this makes you feel good because you think it's working and it's working quickly, and therefore I like it because I can use it with clients to push them through that first bit of motivation to get that change. So I will work alongside the physical aspect as well at the same time in a different way, and we'll talk about why that is in a minute. But it's changing that motivation for the better, and it's giving somebody that golden ticket to make a difference.
Yeah, I think it's starting to see the progress. We all need to see some fruits of our efforts, don't we, at some point? Otherwise, whatever it is you're doing, whether that's in business or whatever, if things just don't feel like they're going anywhere, you soon start to question why you're doing that. And that can be a real challenge. If you've got a lot of weight to lose and you feel like you're putting 100% effort in, for 2 weeks and you're railing against hunger, and hunger's powerful. It's, it's a survival drive at the end of the day. You will at some point start to say, oh God, is this really worth it? Maybe I'm all right as I am. That kind of, chimp starts waking up in your brain and going, go on, just have it. You can pull it back tomorrow. And I think that voice is what people are saying gets drowned out with these injections. So the effect on the brain, people refer to it as food noise, which I hadn't heard that term until probably about a year ago, but it does seem to tune it out and give people a sense of control. And that is really important, that people can start to feel in control of their health and what they're eating. And, there was times a couple of weeks ago when I was trying to, restrain my eating back after December and went to bed starving 3 nights in a row, woke up really hungry and thought, oh God, I'd take anything just to not feel that. Now it passes. For me, not saying it necessarily does for other people, but I can well understand that actually now these are out there, I can see why many people are really interested, and I'm not against it by any means. I think they can have a really crucial role for an awful lot of people. But, and there is always a but with everything, as we've said in other podcasts when we've talked about hormones and other medications that we use, there's always a trade-off. And I would like to see people having more of a sense of where their problem areas are, realistically, a good hard look in the mirror of, they might say, oh, well, I know I snack too much in the evening, or I don't know, my portion sizes are probably, you might have a rough idea, but what does that actually look like in data? What are the number of calories, more or less, that you're eating on a week-to-week basis as a baseline? And then compare that. What do these injections do? Do they put you into a 500 or 600 calorie a day deficit? That would be really interesting to see. And I don't necessarily think that the providers, I don't think the NHS is going into that much detail, but even the providers privately who are offering wraparound support, I don't know that they're looking at it in that much detail, because it's tedious to track your food and count your calories. It gets really boring after about a week. It's really valuable. And I'm sure we'll come on and discuss towards the end. You can't neglect that precious muscle, which is just so essential.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I can guarantee you, like all diets, this is no different to any other diet. Diets work. This will work. When you stop doing it, it won't work. Unless you change your lifestyle. Everything works. But as soon as you stop it, it stops working. There is no long-term magic cure that's going to work forever unless you change the way you do business. So if you're going to go onto a GLP-1, this is your time that you need to address exactly what you just said. What is your behaviour? What is driving that behaviour? Yeah, your behaviour is going to change because the GLP-1 is going to change it for you. But once you stop taking it, if you still got that monkey in the back saying, oh yeah, bit of stress, chocolate biscuit, he's still there and he's still going to say the same things. You've got to change the way you address this. And absolutely, you cannot take these GLP-1s and say, it doesn't matter, I look great. I've escaped the ischemic heart disease. But if you've traded that off against muscle, there is, as we've talked before, there is a whole raft of diseases and pathologies that are waiting for you if you've got a low muscle density and a low bone density. And you get that from exercise. So GLP-1s have to go in hand in a different regime, but hand in hand with exercise. The reason I say it's a different regime is because GLP-1s are going to push you towards being hypoglycemic. So it's very easy to make somebody hypoglycemic who's on a GLP-1, You shouldn't, as a normal, healthy individual, become hypoglycemic just doing nothing. But if you are doing high intensity exercise and you're on GLP-1, then there's a good chance you become hypo, and that in itself, it can make you feel quite poorly and can in the worst case scenarios make you go unconscious. But you can manage that, and you can manage that by appropriate fueling within exercise and understanding what you're doing. It's no different to running a marathon or doing an ultra. You have to change the way you fuel your body during exercise, and that's the same with the GLP-1. But remember, stop taking the GLP-1, back to where you were before.
Yeah, and there was one study I was aware of which looked at what happened in the year after stopping GLP-1s. There was 4 groups. I did put this in a newsletter several months ago. And within that group, there was obviously the control group who had just had standard advice and care. There was the group that had had GLP-1s with diet and exercise input. There's the group that just had the GLP-1s. Anyway, the short answer to the long-winded description is that the group that hadn't changed their lifestyle and developed a training habit and new habits around eating didn't just regain what they'd lost in their year on the GLP-1, they regained it plus about 6 or 7 pounds. And that feeds into what we know, again, comes down to this survival. Your body thinks it's been starved. So when food is suddenly available again, there is this mode that it kicks into to preserve things at all costs, to prevent the starvation risk, because our bodies are designed to make us survive at all costs. But it's not automatic that will happen. And my sense is with people, and I'm getting this from people who I've spoken to who've been buying the injections and are having some success, is they keep intending to come on to all of that. It's like, yeah, I'll get the injections first, yeah, and then I'm going to start exercising, and then I'm going to start doing this. But like, as we know, you can always push it further into the future. Yeah. I haven't yet spoken to many people who are at that point when they've gone, right, I don't think I need to keep buying these. I need to now plan how I'm going to transition off them. I'd like to speak to those people. And if anybody listening to this is at that stage, then absolutely, this is a group of people I'm really keen to work with, because that can make or break it. And, I can mention my mum because there's zero chance of her listening to this, but she's used Ozempic as a type 2 diabetic. And within 2 months of stopping it, the diabetic nurse, for whatever reason, stopped it. She put a stone on in 2 months. And now she's back on Mounjaro, is finding it really difficult to get that stone that came on so easily to move again. They are potentially so good, but you really have to be prepared to do some of the work, as you do with anything. And I don't know that message is necessarily getting out, and it's not trying to poo-poo it or anything or discredit it. It's doing things the right way to get the most out of it, I think.
So let's talk about the downsides then, because there's a lot of talk about, I read these non-truths that Mounjaro is the highest litigation drug currently in the US, and that's just rubbish. But it makes a good headline on Facebook or wherever. The downsides, and there's sadly a case of a nurse who started Mounjaro and died of pancreatitis a number of days or weeks after starting.
It was days. Days. I read the story again the other week. Yeah.
So, pancreatitis is a thing. Pancreatitis is a thing, whatever. Pancreatitis has a mortality. So the pancreas is a complex organ, is highly vascular, and is where digestion basically happens. And you can get inflammation from the pancreas for many reasons, one of which is alcohol. The other one is scorpion bites. And when we were at medical school...
Oh, God, yeah, I forgot about
that. I can only remember tumours, scorpion bites, and there's a whole raft, toxins, etc., that can cause pancreatitis, as well as these GLP-1s, which can cause pancreatitis. It's a relatively rare complication. It is a serious complication. For example, to put that into context, many antibiotics are potentially deadly with their side effect regime, but you just don't see those side effects. They're rare. And it's the same with this. We can't focus on rare side effects and make that out to be something that isn't. I'm not saying these drugs aren't without risk. what you have to decide is the risk worth it? It's like everything in life, there is a risk. Walking up Snowdon today, there is a risk. And that risk is higher today than it will be in June because we're in winter.
I know I've just come back from the Peak District on Tuesday, which was not a clever decision. It's snowy and icy up there. It was not good.
So, and you have to play that off. But once you get, seeing the Peak District in winter is absolutely magnificent. And you have to play that off against the risk of what's going to happen. And this is no different. Life has a risk.
I think leaving the pancreatitis to one side, which is potentially, yes, much more serious, but much more rare, there are some people who are just so nauseous or who vomit. And my worry, having seen somebody in this position, is that people, when it comes to eating and weight loss, can get a little bit mixed up in their thinking and override what could the nausea in the psychological sense, in that, well, it's okay because at least if I feel nauseous, I'm not going to eat, and not eating is good because it will mean that I lose weight. It isn't. Nor is vomiting, and nor is diarrhea. Dysentery and chemotherapy will give you diarrhea and vomiting, and you will lose weight, but you're not going to be healthy and you're not going to feel great. No. But sadly, this has happened, and I did see somebody whose vomiting was so severe that they then got so horrendously dehydrated they developed a DVT. Now that won't then be registered necessarily as a complication of the medication because it's a downstream consequence of severe dehydration. But look at the dots and join them. And in amongst that is this kind of disordered relationship with food and eating. And I can understand how that happens if you struggled with your weight for a really long time. But if you're just buying these and you're not getting any support, and if you feel a sense of shame around needing them, which some people do, it might deter you from ringing out of hours for a bit of advice. It might deter you from, you might not be able to get into CGP because we know that that's not necessarily as straightforward as it perhaps once was. So if you're just buying this from a provider who just gives you the prescription and ticks the box to say that they've told you need to do diet and exercise, but you're really struggling with nausea and you don't want to waste the money that you've spent on it, and you're thinking, well, I feel nauseous, but it's fine because I'll still lose weight. That's not a sustainable way to manage this and get the most out of it. And you can't eat nothing. You've got to still get enough protein in your diet, enough micronutrients in your diet. You can't just have a banana and a packet of crisps for lunch because, well, you're not that hungry and it doesn't matter because it's only a packet of crisps. And that is happening. And that bothers me because, again, surely this needs to be about building a healthier version of yourself with less body fat, hopefully at least not trading off any muscle. But that needs to be the mindset for these things to work as well as we know they can work. But it's not always the case.
No. Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Do you want to do
it? Do I want to do it? What, the GLP-1s?
Yeah.
Last week I did, when I was fed up in bed thinking, I'm starving. What can I go and eat now? I would have. But as I've said, it passes. I honestly think, if I look back, I've never had a major weight problem, but I have to think about what I eat. I think about food all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going away this weekend, and as we were planning it, my first thought is, right, what am I going to do about food? Food for the journey, food then I get there, what if I can't get this? Other people, I've worked with people who'll turn up for an 11-hour day at work with no food.
Yeah, what is that about?
And I go, we don't have a canteen in this building. You're going to get hungry. And they just haven't thought about it. And I'm, if you put it on a continuum, I'm the opposite end of that.
Yeah.
So I honestly think maybe 10 years ago, when I had to get to grips with how I was going to manage my food and my exercise, if I didn't go, the way my genetics would probably take me, I had to get into preparing food and thinking about food to the point that I'm a pain in the arse about it now. But everybody won't necessarily do that and will still go, well, I can just dial down the hunger.
Yeah.
I've just pulled a clip of Robbie Williams talking about going up on his Ozempic this week because he's at the Golden Globes next week. You just think,
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah. But would I take it? Yeah, I would take it. I wouldn't be scared of it, but I would be thinking, okay, so what's the exit plan? I don't want to be beholden to something forever. That that wouldn't work for me. But would you?
Yeah, I think so. In fact, I think I might. As part of this podcast, I'll offer myself up as for the benefit of our listeners. I will become a guinea pig and go. I'll give this a go. I'm really lucky with weight because I'm lucky to be, as many people say, oh, he's big boned. But I'm.
You don't say that to a woman.
Yes, but I'm lucky enough to be quite muscular and not in a bodybuilder way, but just quite muscular, so I carry off being fat quite well. But I think it's probably important that I don't think I need it, but I think I'd like to know what it feels like for my clients, and to also to know what the downside to it is, and just have a sort of play around with it. And because I think it's going to become a more stable part of the fitness industry. And what worries me is that there's a lot of people out there playing in this field. It's a bit like it feels quite unregulated in a way, where you can get it. You can literally get it anywhere now without seeing anybody. And it's a bit like the aesthetic market. I'm a bit worried about who's regulating this, who's really dealing with this, and I really want to understand it, because I think it's going to become a more and more part of our arena when people come to us and go, right, okay, well, I'm on this, or I want to be on this, I want this transformation, and I want to take part in that. And also understanding that from that perspective. In the same way that I take creatine and protein and I've seen the benefits of that, I want to be able to understand this, so why not?
Well, and at some point the price is going to come down, but not for a while yet, but the price is going to come down, and then the landscape is going to change all over again. And the genie's not going back in the bottle anytime soon. I had a decent year of being mostly on a ketogenic diet. I wouldn't say as religiously as others, but I was curious to try it because people were yapping on about it. And I have to say, it's the only time I have not felt hungry.
Yeah.
And it was quite nice to be able to actually be out for most of the day and not be obsessing about food. Why don't people just do that? Good question. Why don't more people do it? It's hard. It's hard to get into it.
So and also to do the keto, you've got to really, really plan.
Yeah.
Because there's no point going to the shop I'm thinking I've forgotten my lunch, because the shop isn't going to have keto for you. They're going to have carb-tastic waiting for you. Everything carb is. Now that's how we perceive. If you go to the garage, or you go to Tesco's or Sainsbury's or wherever, and you go to the lunchtime deal, you're going to get sandwiches, and inside the sandwich is going to be a nice mayo something or other, and they're going to offer you a packet of crisps and drink or a chocolate bar.
Yeah, so, the meal deal.
Yeah, meal deal, carbotastic. There isn't a keto waiting for you there. But also, in the back of your mind with keto, you're always thinking, this is a lot of meat. And I'm not a carnivore. I'm not a carnivore. There's something missing out of my diet. And of course there is. And, you've got to understand that. And also, in the real world, if you go to paleo, meat is something that you would kill infrequently, and you'd have to hunt it down. When we talked about Africa, you're going to have to put a lot of effort into meat. Whereas the keto, I don't know, it just doesn't seem like a long time answer that your body would be happy with.
Well, and also, nobody's going to invite you for dinner. You're a pain in the arse when you go to anybody's house, and it's very antisocial.
Yeah,
because we're just not set up that way. And the evangelists of it will say, well, we've just been conditioned now to look at a plate and see carbs, and restaurants will fill you up in carbs so you go away feeling full. And I do get all of that. That's the business model. That is what it is. And in other cultures, that's not necessarily the same. I mean, some parts of Europe, they're not so carb heavy. And I remember listening to this nutrition guy on a podcast who was Spanish, and his parents lived in the center of Spain, quite high up, and he said the local diet is almost ketogenic. It's just part of the culture of where they live. But that's not really the case for anywhere here with our global standard diet and Deliveroo shooting past the door all of the time. That isn't going to happen. So I think I'm not against keto, I'm not against low carb or any of those things for people if they can make it work in and around their lifestyle, and having experienced how much less hunger you can feel on that, I can see why why these injections can be so life-changing for people. But I want people to understand. I mean, I've had a patient say to me, "Oh, well, I'm just going to keep buying them. I'm just going to stay on it for good." And the manufacturers would say, "Well, you need at least 2 years." Well, they have said that.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I mean, I don't know if you've seen the benefits globally it has to your body. So we also use GLP-1s for heart failure because it increases cardiac performance, it increases bone density, it increases cerebral vascular function, so it increases your brain performance as well. So these GLP-1s are being hailed as extremely good globally for your body, not just these small parts that we're talking about. So I don't know, maybe it's something, we're all waiting for that wonder drug, aren't we? We're waiting for that something that they're eventually going to put in the water because it's so good for us that it's going to extend our lives so much, and it's going to be so great that actually it's going to be something that we just have in the same way as we've sanitised water because we worked out that was a really good idea. They're going to do something like that with the drug. I don't think this is it, but there are benefits of staying on it.
Yeah, I was speaking to the rep from Wegovy. I spoke to her a couple of times, and they have a new license. This isn't a pitch for them by any means, but they now have got a new license for cardiovascular risk reduction. And of course, my brain immediately went, well, yeah, your cardiovascular risk is going to go down if you're losing weight. But no, it seems to be independent of weight loss.
Yeah.
Triglycerides, a type of fat in the blood, which we don't have any means of treating. They don't respond to statins, but they came down. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was quite staggering by how much they came down. And I said to her, so who's going to prescribe those? Are we going to get cardiologists now wanting to prescribe GLP-1s for their, post-heart attack patients? Again, it would be great. There's no money in our NHS to pay for that. So that's going to bounce around while they try and decide who pays for that. And then osteoarthritis. There was a really impressive study done on women with knee osteoarthritis being managed with GLP-1. Their pain scores came down significantly. That did seem to be more mediated by weight loss, which would make sense if you think about the physics of it. But nonetheless, somebody who needs a new knee and is being told, well, you need to go and lose 4 stone because we're not going to operate on you until you lose 4 stone or whatever number they pluck out of the air. What do those people do when their knee is in agony? And again, you can see that actually there could be a role for this because that person may well be quite willing to do whatever it takes, but nobody's going to stop. I'm not going to put somebody with a barbell on their back if their knee is cripplingly painful. That's just outright cruel, even though it would probably do some good, but you're just not going to be able to get over that hurdle. So I think there's amazing potential for them there, but who's going to pay for it? I think people will have to suck it up themselves. I did have one patient say, well, I'm not ordering takeaways, so to be honest, it's still cost neutral. So it is whatever 150 quid a month that he was spending. He wasn't spending it on food that he otherwise would have done. Fair point.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a fair point. I suppose but it does sound like a lot of money, doesn't it? £150 a month for...
Not if you're Robbie Williams.
No, of course not. They're expecting it comes in a gold pen and, somebody delivers it for him. We won't be injecting themselves with it.
Yeah. But it is. Yeah, I mean, cost is real, but I think, who knows, maybe we'll be talking about it in 10 years' time and it will look different again when it's off patent. We'll see.
Yeah. Okay, so what's our take-home message then? So my take-home message would be, carry on watching the podcast. We'll let you know in about 6 months how good it is or not. But
when you show up, absolutely jacked and buff.
Yeah, buff. It's amazing what you can do with a bit of software and filters. Definitely, I'll give it a go, and we'll see from there. But also, I think it is a fantastic drug. I think it's fantastic if you are pre-diabetic or diabetic. Definitely, do not even think about it. Take it, and if you're really struggling with all other areas of weight loss, if you've tried everything else and you just feel like you're just not winning, then book in to see Lynette or myself.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to work with you so you do this the right way. That is a shameless plug. I do. I want to see what difference it makes in the measurable stuff that we can measure, so that we start collecting that data, because, you know, Boots Online aren't going to collect it for you, nor are any of the other big providers are available, and there's nothing wrong with any of those providers.
No.
You know, they're doing everything as it should, and it's fine. But it's an opportunity to really try and work out where you're going wrong, because unless you're going to stay on it forever, that feeling of hunger is going to come flooding back in, and you need to prepare for that. And you can prepare for it. That's the thing. You can actually prepare for that, and you can lay the groundwork so that actually this works as a tool for a period of time, and you're in a much stronger position. It's manage it. I mean, nobody solves their weight problem. You only ever learn to manage it. I think it's a lifelong process.
Absolutely. But it's just another tool in your box. It's something it's not something you should be ashamed of. It's definitely not. It doesn't make weight loss any less real. It's not about that. It's about you as an individual and what you want to achieve. But I would definitely say do it in partnership with an educated, medically educated PT who's going to understand what you're doing and can understand how we can manipulate that with exercise as well.
Yeah. Good. Couldn't end it on a better point, I would say. Next time we'll talk about that documentary on Netflix.
Next time.
which is Don't Die. But yeah, good stuff.